All right, guys, we are back, and I'm trying my best to switch my brain on and to find some way to actually be able to contribute to the conversation that we're about to have. But as always, we have Ben here, and everybody knows that Ben is the brains of this, and he's who everybody tunes into. But we are
Yep.
also joined by Mr. Blake Bowman from GuerillaZen Fitness. And Ben, you found this guy. You wanted to talk to him. You've been talking to me about it for several weeks now.
Oh yeah.
Again, you're the minds of this operation. You're the brains behind everything and the looks. You've got this great
Well,
sound.
you're the hair of the operation, so you got that
That
going for you.
I will I will take that. Although I think Blake has me beat on hair today. So, with all that being said, I'm going to step back a little bit, turn this over to you, Ben, and I'll jump in when I don't feel hugely intimidated by the two of you. So, Ben, take it away.
All right, sounds good. As Adam said, we got Blake Bowman on the air from GuerillaZen Fitness. Blake is a great guest for us. He's going to talk to us today about a lot of corrective exercises, some more advanced level biohacking stuff that we really haven't got into on this show. But first, Blake, let's talk through the situation you find yourself in right now, or the situation you put yourself in. I think as a introduction to the biohacking, introduction to what you have going on. Let's just talk you through the normal daily life of Blake Bowman and a niacin flush. What do you got going on there?
Yeah, well, I've been doing this sauna niacin protocol recently where you take niacin and get in the sauna, but each day you do this for 30 days, and each day you titrate up your dose of niacin. So you take more and more and more and more niacin. And niacin is a B vitamin, for those of you that don't know. But one of the kind of effects of taking it, especially at high doses, is it rapidly increases circulation and gives you like this sensation that your skin is like burned, almost like a sunburn. It's what it feels like, my entire body. And I took a higher dose today right before we got on here. Actually, a couple of hours, like hour and a half before we got on here, and went in the sauna. And I got out and I was just like feeling really out of it like 10 minutes ago. And I was talking to my girlfriend. I was like, oh my God, I got to do a podcast right now. I feel like I'm going to like die. Like I took a really cold shower and it somewhat cooled me off, but I'm still very hot right now. So, but yeah, I'm doing that as a part of like a heavy metal detoxification protocol. It essentially assists in the sweating. Like you sweat normally in a sauna, you combine the niacin with it, you sweat like 10 times more. And, that's the whole point. So, but yeah, that kind of explains my current predicament here.
So yeah, there's a good intro to Blake for the audience. But besides the like crazy niacin flush, let's just walk through who you are as a trainer, as someone in the exercise, fitness, health sphere, and how you got here.
Yeah, so I'm a holistic health expert and coach, and I'm an online educator. I really educate a lot of people online through social media, YouTube, Instagram. I make a lot of educational content there and teach people about holistic health, biohacking stuff, and corrective exercise. Those are really my main niches and specialties. And yeah, I'm all about helping people improve their lives and optimize themselves from a mind, body, and spirit perspective. So that's what I help people do. My clients and the people that, read my educational posts and watch my videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's awesome because what you're doing now is obviously on the higher end of what most people would consider normal. If you take the general population audience, not a whole lot of people are going to say sauna, niacin, let's hit it. We're going there 30 days straight.
Yeah.
Heavy metal detox. But what you do a great job of is the corrective exercises and correcting imbalances. And since we have a large audience of more of the general population, like you'd see, can you kind of walk us through maybe 3 or 4 things where you see the majority of people or a large amount of people have muscular imbalances that can be corrected relatively simply? things such as, tightening of the psoas muscles from sitting down too much, rounding your shoulders. I know you have great exercises for all things like this. If you can pick maybe 2 or 3 where it's this really, easy thing to fix if you're aware of it and if you're willing to fix it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think before I even answer that, it should be understood by people why they would want to address these things in the first place. Posture. I talk about this a lot. Posture doesn't just look bad from an aesthetic, perspective. It actually regulates every physiologic function in our bodies. Everything from blood pressure to hormones to your mood, everything. Every physiologic function in the body is influenced or regulated to a degree by posture. Also, posture is the alignment of your joints. And just like a car or any kind of mechanical machinery has an optimal way to line up, your body does too. And again, bringing it to a car, if you drive a car across the country with misaligned tires, you're going to have a breakdown at some point. And the same is true with the body and posture. If you're an athlete, you're very active, you have poor posture, it predisposes you to injuries. So it's extremely important. And it's the muscles that attach onto your bones that dictate the posture that you have. It's really about muscular balance. People that have poor posture have muscle imbalances. Certain muscles will be too tight, other muscles will be too weak. And because muscles attach on the bones, they dictate the alignment of the bones. And the way you actually fix your posture is by addressing the muscular imbalances that you have. And that's a great question, Ben. I've been assessing people and helping people, my online coaching clients, improve their posture for years now. And there are certain muscle imbalances that the general population has, like all of them. Okay.
Right.
I'll go over those now. Like, one is weak glutes. It doesn't matter if you have hip pain, back pain, knee pain, rounded forward shoulders. Strengthening the glutes can oftentimes help with that. By stabilizing the hips, the knees, putting the pelvis into a better alignment. Strengthening the glutes will help to accomplish all of these things. So we pretty much all have weak asses nowadays because we're sitting on them all day. And that creates massive, biomechanical dysfunction, leads to postural issues and things like that. So, any kind of exercise that really targets your glutes, that's going to help a lot of people, especially people in the camp that I just mentioned. Another super important area to strengthen for people that is oftentimes neglected is the obliques. So your love handle areas. Something simple like side planks put into your gym routine is something that's really powerful that will make a huge difference. So, that's the second area. And then, another really important area for almost everybody to be strengthening are the muscles that sit in between the shoulder blades, the scapular retractors, the rhomboids, middle and lower trapezius. These are muscles that squeeze your shoulder blades together. They're undertrained and weak in the majority of the population. If your shoulders are rounded forwards, then pretty much you can guarantee yourself that you have weak scapular retractors. And again, those are those muscles that sit between the shoulder blades. Because if they were strong, you wouldn't be in that forward shoulder rounded position in the first place. So that's just, again, one of those areas, just like the glutes and the obliques, that without even putting together a customized plan for somebody, I can almost tell you that for sure they would benefit from strengthening those muscles, just because these muscles are weak in about 99% of the population.
Right. And that's, part of modern life. We're all sitting down all the time. We're all, staring at a computer. We're hunched over forward. We have our hips in flexion. We're just misaligned always. So sitting down is kind of, they say it's more dangerous than smoking, and that might be hyperbole to a certain extent, but it is something that's dangerous. So
yeah,
when you're looking at, I know, especially like for Adam, being in the strength and conditioning field, having glute weaknesses is going to be extremely detrimental to athletes and general population alike. So when we look at glute strengthening exercises, I know a lot of people want to get under a heavy bar, do some squats, maybe do some deadlifts, maybe do, heavier weights like that. But we can also do things like mini bands, which I see you bring out quite a bit, where it's not this super heavy resistance that I think maybe off-putting or intimidating to some people. It can be things that are a little bit more simple and a little bit more accessible. Can you walk through like a couple good glute exercises, maybe at home, that people can help correct themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and the glutes are just so important, man, for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
They're undertrained in pretty much everybody. Do you guys know Brett Contreras, the glute guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I've read a lot of his work, and basically people, when the main mistake that people make when they're trying to strengthen their glutes is they just select the wrong exercises in the first place, right? They'll do a lot of squats and deadlifts and things like that. And those are all axially loaded exercises. So the load vector, which is where the resistance is coming from, is axial. It's moving from the top down, right? You're doing back squats with a barbell on your back and is pushing straight down on you. That's an axial load. With exercises like that, you are getting glute contraction. The glutes work with exercises like that, but they won't contract as much as they will if you use a different load vector, which is like a different exercise where the resistance is coming from a different direction. So the glutes, to be clear, they do technically fire and work during things like squats and deadlifts, but they won't fire as much as they will under what's called antero-posteriorly loaded exercises. And that's a mouthful, but basically that just means that the resistance is coming from the front and going out the back of your body. So like a hip thruster, hip thrusters are, that's his whole thing, Brett Contreras. That's how you get the glutes to contract way harder. If you're really trying to address an imbalance that you have in your glutes, you have to do direct glute work. And a way to train them more directly is with those antero-posterior exercises. So anything like laying on your back, pushing your hips up, just doing body weight hip thrusters is a good way to like activate the glutes for a lot of people. But then if you're like a high level athlete and you're trying to do direct glute work and you already have like a pretty solid strength foundation, you might want to progress that and start doing like barbell hip thrusters, which always looks funny in the gym, especially when you're in the squat rack or in the bench area around a bunch of other bros. Then you get on the ground and start like hip thrusting. That's you get a lot of attention that way. But that's a great way to strengthen the glutes. Really, is just hip thrusters, and there's a lot of variations of that you can do. Cable pull throughs are good too, but people just need to think about the load vector, which again is where the resistance is coming from. Anything that's pushing like resistance like into your belly and it's like going out the back side of you, any exercise where you set up like that's extending your hips, that's going to hit the glutes a lot harder than squats and deadlifts will. Another thing that's really a big problem, Ben, is synergistic dominance of the hamstrings. And that's like this scenario where the hamstrings are too developed and strong compared to the glutes. And when people try to do glute exercises, their hamstrings just take over and pretty much dominate the movement. And that sometimes happens with these exercises, the antero-posterior ones. So if you're doing hip thrusters and you're just feeling your hamstrings work, then you're making this imbalance worse. And it's kind of complicated because you could tell people they need to strengthen their glutes and then they'll go and do something like what we just talked about. They'll do a bunch of hip thrusters, but you have to be paying attention as to where you're feeling the muscle contraction. If you're feeling it in your hamstrings more than your glutes, then you probably have this synergistic dominance of the hamstrings going on. And the remedy for that is pretty simple. I always tell people to use interset foam rolling or interset self-myofascial release with like a softball in the hamstrings in between sets. That's what interset means of hip thrusters. So an example of interset, rolling of the hamstrings would be in between sets of hip thrusters. Let's say you're doing 4 sets of hip thrusters. If you're feeling your hamstrings work harder than your glutes, get a softball and jam that thing into your hamstrings on both sides and roll out both sides for like 20 to 30 seconds. And do that in between each set of hip thrusters. The idea here is that will shut down the hamstrings a little bit so they don't have to work as hard. It'll decrease the neurological drive going into them, which causes the glutes to have to like pick up the slack and, become the prime mover, turn on again, and basically be the muscles that are actually working when you're actually doing those exercises. So that's something that's important to know. I've talked about that in videos in the past, that synergistic dominance of the hamstrings. It's something that I want to talk more about because I think it's super important.
Yeah, it's always good when you have that passion project that like very few people care about. It's like, oh yeah, synergistic hamstring dominance. Got it. Yeah, okay. But it but it is something that is important. And the nice thing about those like hip thrusters, barbell loaded or not, is that when you put your knee into flexion like that, it does take a little bit of the length out of the hamstring and puts more force on the glutes. So if we're thinking, it's tough to explain in an audio format, but you'll be on your butt with your back against a bench, feet on the ground, and you just push your hips up towards the sky, really driving your back into that bench, driving your feet into the ground, and using your glutes to squeeze yourself up. That's what we're talking about here, to be that like major glute mover.
Mm-hmm.
So, Adam, you got something?
I'm taking it all in and I'm writing down the different words that you guys are using so I can use them later on and sound really smart. So I love
there you go. Yeah, I got this mic in my way. So I got the new studio built up, but it's cutting off half the screen. So that's a whole other issue.
Nope. I'll jump in. Perfect. Well, I guess one thing real quick, and I mean, this is just for personal reasons, and I'm curious what Blake would prescribe in this situation, but it seems like as well as having student athletes or just general population people with glutes that aren't firing correctly or just glute weakness, we also seem to see a lot of quad dominant athletes and quad dominant kids because they can't walk and run correctly. So, they're heel stomping and things like that, and it is underactive hamstrings at that point. Do you have anything that you would prescribe to, I don't know, maybe with the foam rolling or smashing or things like that I could use to help these kids out?
When it comes to like generalized muscle imbalances in the legs like that, I really like to use like really athletic unilateral exercises to promote more muscular balance. So, unilateral means one-sided, right? So most people strengthen their legs with bilateral exercises, right? They're doing a lot of squats, deadlifts. These are not super athletic movements. You're not really going to be standing stationary, squatting down, and then coming back up in any sport, really. I mean, more sports are more dynamic than that. And they require more complex movement patterns. And as a result of practicing more complex movement patterns, you just train your neuromuscular system in a more balanced way. So I like to use a lot of these, quote unquote, more functional exercises like single leg deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats, lunges. And when I see somebody with like poor muscle activation patterns, whether that's glute weakness or hamstring dominance or quad dominance or anything like that, as part of their general strengthening, program that I'll put them on, most of their strengthening exercises, their compound lifts are going to be these unilateral exercises.
Yeah.
The ones I just mentioned are some of my favorites. Single leg deadlifts. That's like, you pretty much can't even call that a deadlift because in terms of how that feels like in your own proprioception and the way that feels to execute versus a traditional deadlift is so much different. You're like focusing on not rotating. There's a shitload of proprioception coming into play because you're just on one leg. You have to stabilize way more. It's like, it feels totally different than, lifting with two legs. But that doesn't really answer your question, I guess, specifically.
No,
but
it's a good point. And I think that's a lot of the problem that we see too is doing too many things on one leg. And you see it a lot in the strength and conditioning field, and it's just not being creative with your programming and stuff like that. Or, in my case, it's, we have a lot of young kids and undertrained kids. So it's like, I got to teach them how to do something on 2 feet first, and then we'll get to that single leg eventually. But that's a great point, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So awesome. Yeah. With that, like we said, another big issue is the whole scapular protraction thing and not having enough scapular retraction. I think that's a big issue that I see around just, everywhere, working in the chain gym, just seeing people on the street. Everyone's got their shoulders hunched forward. And you did touch on that where we need to work on those scapular retractors. Um, can you just go into quickly how we do that
Yeah,
for the people at home?
sure. Well, one really simple exercise is just to do a band pull apart. Grab a resistance band, shoulder width apart, hold it in front of your chest, stretch it, pull it apart like you're giving somebody a big hug, stretch it open, touch the band to your chest, and then return back to the starting position. That's like a pretty simple exercise. If people just threw that into their routine a couple times a week, that would really help them out. But another thing that is equally important to strengthening those muscles is to mobilize the joints underneath it. So a lot, and what I'm talking about here is the thoracic spine, the spine between your neck and your lower back. It's all one spine, but we call that segment the thoracic spine. That is stiff in a lot of people, and a lot of people also have kyphosis there, which is excessive forward rounding. And when you have that going on, your shoulders only have one place to go, and that's forward along with them, right? So typically, if somebody has forward rounded shoulders, you're going to know, yeah, they are going to have, weakness in those scapular retractors that we just talked about, but they're also likely going to have a stiff thoracic spine and a kyphotic thoracic spine. And they need to mobilize that on a foam roller. And I've showed this before in some of my videos, but somebody that has forward rounded shoulders, yes, they would benefit from strengthening those muscles. That exercise that we just described would be one that would help. Another thing that would help, though, is to just put a foam roller on the ground, put the foam roller, like lay it on your back so that the foam roller is just touching the upper back, and then to kind of like let your spine extend over the foam roller, basically using the foam roller as a fulcrum to force your spine to bend over. Do that a bunch of times, keeping the core braced. That forces you to extend from the thoracic spine, and eventually that starts to bring more mobility to that area. As Kelly Starrett says, motion is lotion. The more you extend and flex from that area, the more mobile it becomes, and then you just restore function to that area. And that will improve your shoulder issues and your neck and low back issues as well.
Right. And I noticed in addition to that, a lot of people do have tight pec minors, pec majors, and the rotator cuff around that area, which again pulls things forward. And when we're talking muscular imbalances, it's always going to be in pairs. There's really no such thing as this muscle is too blank without another one being the opposite of that. So when we're talking of, poorly mobile thoracic spine, rounded forward, that means your chest is going to be rounded forward as well. And you do have to work on both sides of that equation to really figure it out. So
it's really good that you brought that up, Ben, because a lot of people, are aware that they have tight muscles. So they'll do things like foam roll, or they'll go and get a massage, right?
Right.
But yeah, they're only addressing one side of the coin there, one side of the muscular imbalance, the tight overactive muscles. That's great. But if you're not doing that in conjunction with strengthening the weak muscles, then you're not addressing the imbalance fully. And at best, you're just going to get temporary relief from whatever you're doing with the foam rolling or the massage work.
Right. And the unfortunate thing is that over time, these muscles will actually physiologically change to get shorter and adapt to your poor posture. So this is something that isn't, like weak glutes. Maybe you can put that off a little bit. But if we're thinking of these shortening muscles, they are constantly shortening. You're losing contractile units there called sarcomeres, and they actually go away with time. Your body will adapt to the shortening of the muscle. They say, hey, we're not contracting as much as we needed to anymore, or in the past. Let's get rid of them. It's excess. We're going to jettison all these muscle fibers. And it will physiologically change your body in a permanent way or a semi-permanent way until you correct it through corrective means like you're discussing. And I know you said you have a softball. I'm a lacrosse ball guy for pec minors and rotator cuff, a little bit more painful, but you get to really get in there and, get the whole meat of the issues. Can you go through like what your protocol would be for pec minor release and all those muscles of the rotator cuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. Focusing on the pec minor, or any imbalance rather, I like to dig down to like the deepest level of causation and try to address it there, right? So yeah, you can assess somebody's like shoulder function, look at the position of it, kind of palpate the muscle, figure out that their pec minor is tight, and then you can try to address it right there on that level of causation, I guess, right? Which is kind of just addressing the symptom. If you just recognize that the pec minor is tight, and then you just try to release the pec minor, you're just stopping right there. You're not digging deeper. You might be missing something. And one of the things that contributes most to actually, I don't want to say contributes most, but definitely one thing that contributes to hyperactive, super tight, locked up pec minor is secondary breathing patterns, because that's a secondary respiration muscle.
Right.
So essentially what I'm talking about here is, we're supposed to breathe using our diaphragm, which is a big dome-shaped muscle inside of our abdomen. A lot of people out there, people that take shallow chest breaths, are actually not using that muscle. They're relying on these muscles called secondary respiration muscles. The pec minor is one of them. There's other ones in your neck, like your upper traps and your scalenes. These are supposed to help out the diaphragm, kind of like how the hamstrings are supposed to help out the glutes. But if you're breathing wrong, you're taking these shallow chest breaths all day, and you're not using your diaphragm, then these muscles tighten up. They get really, really tight, right? It's like you're doing like 1,000 reps on your pecs every day. Every time you take a breath all throughout the day, that's a lot of work for the pec minor to do. So my point is, you just want to dig deep down into different, the deepest levels of causation. So if that was the true problem, somebody was breathing wrong, that caused their pecs to tighten up, their pecs would just be tight every day. You could release it with a lacrosse ball, and then it might come right back, within a couple of hours. And then you're just stuck in this cycle of having to release over and over and over and over again. Nothing ever changes. So that's one thing that I would look for, secondary breathing patterns. And then you just want to look at the position of the shoulders too. I mean, if somebody is the pec minor will internally rotate the shoulder, and it can also pull the shoulder forward anteriorly. So if you're like hunched over, you're in it and you're working at a computer, and your arm is internally rotated, and your shoulder is dumped forward, your pec minor is going to adaptively shorten to that position, just like what you were describing, right? So again, if you're just spending a lot of time in that position where the pec minor is short, then it's going to stay short, and you're going to run into that same cycle where if you're like a student or something and you're slumped over your desk and you stay like that for like 5 hours, and then you go to the gym, you realize your pecs are tight and you release them, and then the next day you go right back to sitting for 5 hours in the same position. You're stuck in that cycle again, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of like pec minor stretching, self massage on it, and those are all great, but you want to check the positions that you're putting your shoulder in and you're staying in for a long period of time. And you want to check your breathing patterns too, especially as it pertains to the pec minor.
Yeah. And again, the great thing about you is that you bring the interconnectedness of everything to the table. And the symptom is rarely the problem, is what we see in the body. Can you speak on how to get to the problem, maybe? Or is that a higher level of education that probably the man on the street, the woman on the street, aren't really going to realize without significant research into anatomy, biology, biomechanics, physiology, all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is, because there are different causes for different. If we're just constricting the scope of what we're talking about, the biomechanics and muscular balance, it's still too complicated. That's why like people like myself are out there, because it's hard to answer that. It depends on what you're talking about, and there are if you want to take this kind of like deep causation approach to like the entire body. Yeah, I mean, you can never learn enough about that. There's a lot of the body is extremely complicated, and it's probably best to just seek out the help of somebody that's, studied that before, even somebody that does it professionally.
Right. And there are a lot of good resources like yourself out there. Can you point the listeners to just like a few other places where you really trust these sources? I know you said Kelly Starrett, Brett Contreras are two guys that are just dominoes in the field. And
Kelly Starrett. Yeah. If you're just like there are some like high level sources like physical therapists and physios that I consult with and read. But they're probably way beyond somebody that's like just layman. But if you're just like an athlete and you have muscular imbalances and you want to learn how to like fix yourself without getting too lost in the weeds with regards to like technical details and anatomical jargon and stuff like that. First off, my stuff that I post on YouTube, I try to take that kind of stuff and break it down into easy to understand concepts for people. But Kelly Starrett is another good one. Kelly Starrett, kind of mumbled it when I first said it there. He wrote a book called Becoming a Supple Leopard, and he runs a company called Mobility WOD. He's really good at doing that. Katie Bowman, who's actually not related to me, but she's another one that's really good. Jill Miller, I'm a fan of. All of us kind of, help people with these things by taking the complicated knowledge and distilling it down to easy to understand concepts, right? Like you don't need to learn about primary respiration, all the muscles involved with it, secondary respiration, all the muscles involved with it. If I can just be like, listen, this is what bad breathing looks like, demonstrate it, and then be like, this is what good breathing looks like, demonstrate it. Effectively, you're learning the same lesson without all of the technical stuff that people get lost in. So, yeah.
Well, it's awesome. It's always good to nerd out on some people. And with this, high level biomechanical research and stuff, I know you got into biohacking and even deeper research into the human body and how everything functions. So can you give a quick overview of maybe just number one, like what is biohacking and why do you do it?
Yeah, biohacking. I don't even like that word anymore. I just say health optimization.
There you
go.
Because
I think because that's essentially what you're saying, but biohacking sounds so like weird. It's very
well, I know you post the links and it's like, biohackers. I don't know. It seems cheesy to me too. It's like, no, it's.
I used to use the word a lot more to describe myself. And recently I've decided to just start saying health optimization, or that's what I help people with, is optimizing their health. But yeah, essentially I would say that's what biohacking is. It's like using oftentimes technology, supplements, lifestyle tweaks, all to optimize health, right? So I would actually consider corrective exercise a part of that. And the reason why I'm interested in that is I've always been interested in that. My study of corrective exercise came out of my own desire to want to optimize my own health and wellness. And it just so happened that that was the area I was lacking the most, which is why I developed so much knowledge in that area. I was I was like a bro for a long period of time. I could deadlift a lot for my weight. I was like 175. I could deadlift like 500 pounds with just a belt on. And that was a lot for my weight. But I had all these muscle imbalances. I was horribly messed up. I had like pain all over the place. Both my knees hurt. I had SI joint pain, issues with my shoulders. I had a surgery on my shoulder. I just didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. I was like 21 and I had all these issues and I had to learn how to fix myself because I wasn't learning it from the doctors and other people I was consulting with. But it's the same desire to optimize my health and wellness, when it came to corrective exercise, that led me to also explore other areas of health and wellness, because I firmly believe in the holistic health philosophy, meaning that, what composes us and what composes our health is multifactorial. We can't just address one factor and expect that to make a huge difference with regards to our life, we have a lot of things that are very important. Our emotional health, the health of our relationships in life, the air quality, the water quality that we consume, the types of food we consume, of course, our exercise. But, you can't just address one to the exclusion of the others and expect that to create an optimal life situation for yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And most people only address two of these factors, right? Diet and exercise. These are well-known factors that go into making up a state of health or ill health. But the fact of the matter is there's just so much more out there. And if you're not addressing the other factors alongside those, you're not going to be healthy, not in today's day and age. It just doesn't work like that. For example, if you're eating quote unquote really healthy and you're training in a very healthy and balanced way, but you go home and you yell at your wife and you have a dysfunctional relationship with her and your kids. Then the next morning you wake up, you go to work, you hate your job there, you hate your boss, you hate working for him. You're not making a lot of money. Your financial health is in poor demand. You go home, you sleep next to a Wi-Fi router, which is EMFing your brain all day. These are things that people don't even think about, right? That person's not going to have a freaking healthy life, man, even though they are addressing their, diet and exercise.
Right.
But the reason why they're not going to have a healthy life is because they're not aware of these other factors that, like I said, go into making a state of health or ill health, and they're not addressing them. And like I said, we're multifactorial beings, right? So biohacking for me is like addressing everything from a mind, body, and spirit level, everything that can take me to the next level in terms of my performance, health, happiness, whatever it is. I'm like after all of that. And corrective exercise has always just been a part of that for me.
Yeah, so in this like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can bring up here, you need food, shelter, water, all that good stuff to survive. I think Blake Bowman's hierarchy of exercise would still be a pyramid, right? With maybe nutrition on the base, exercise on the second tier, and moving up the pyramid. Maybe what's that third tier, fourth tier of the pyramid where people aren't reaching there, but it's something to look at after diet and exercise. I've got this in check. Let's do X next.
Yeah, well, actually, on the base, I would put exercise higher up on the continuum, to be honest.
Would you?
Yeah. There are some things on a base level like that I think are more important, like your relationships, the quality of your water is extreme, and the quantity of it is extremely important too, right? I mean, everybody always says back to the basics, right? But they ignore the basics and they go for other things, right? If you're not adequately hydrated, for example, and you're training really hard, your training is going to have a negative impact on your body instead of a positive impact. Okay. So, for that reason, and there's a lot of other examples like that, but I would put exercise a little bit higher up on the continuum. Another thing too, if you're in a sympathetic nervous system activation, fight or flight all the time, you're stressed out, you're drinking coffee all the time, a hardcore training session might not be the best thing for you in that case too. Maybe you need some yoga, maybe you need some restorative practices or something that's going to calm you down instead of exacerbating the imbalance. So yeah, corrective or exercise in general is actually higher up on the pyramid. Things closer to the base. Nutrition is one of them for sure. Nutrition, hydration, the quality of your thoughts, right? What's going on inside your brain is going to have a tremendous influence on your body, your genetic expression, your hormones. All of these things are related to, the thoughts that you're having. So that's a huge one. The quality of your relationships is huge too, man. Right? If you're with a partner and you guys hate each other, then, how are you going to be happy? And if you're not happy, what's going to be happening physiologically, on a biochemical standpoint, you're going to be low in dopamine, you're going to be high in cortisol. These just open up the pathway to many different diseases and, states of ill health. So those are some things that would be at the bottom of the pyramid. And, then moving up it, then I would put exercise somewhere like second or third tier, and light exposure and EMF exposure too. These are crazy things, but I've had a lot of experts on my podcast talk about these. There are receptors on your cells, photoreceptors. Just like how we have hormone receptors in our body, we have receptors on all of our cells for light particles. Our body literally, and all the cells in our body, it takes in light and it metabolizes light, which is really freaking crazy to think about, because that means that any kind of light that's hitting your skin is affecting you on a cellular level. And people are becoming more aware of this with blue blocking glasses and things like that. Blue light, people are, in the health space at least, are becoming aware of how damaging this is. Basically, you need to start thinking about light like you think about food. There's high quality light. It's usually from the sun that you can expose your body to. And then there's low quality light, like kind of like junk food, junk light. And a lot of this kind of light comes from devices, right? Screens, LED light bulbs. These things are not good for your health, man. And I know it sounds woo-woo and it sounds crazy, but this is not. This is science. Like I said, we know through science that our cells have these photoreceptors. This is like, it sounds woo. So some people might think that this would be higher up on the pyramid, but I don't think it is. A lot of the thought leaders that I've been following, doctors and researchers, are now saying that this is as important as food is. So it's kind of craziness just because it goes against kind of common knowledge and common wisdom. But I don't really think that makes it any less important. I think it just makes the understanding of these things kind of cutting edge. And I think it'll be pretty commonplace within our understanding of health once it develops more in a couple decades here. I think we'll look back at this period of time and look at all the electromagnetic fields and the electromagnetic pollution and bad lighting that we have everywhere, and we'll be like, that was responsible for a lot of the ill health that people were in. But yeah, I got on a tangent there to at the base of the pyramid would essentially be relationships, your diet, your water, and I'd have to think about that. But those are some things. Exercise in general would be a little bit higher up.
Yeah, and that light thing is interesting. It's something that I've never looked into. Adam, I can't speak for you, but I will speak for you. I'm thinking, right? You're probably not really looking into the whole light thing.
Not a ton. Just like what I've heard Ben Greenfield talk about is about all that I could tell you. But no, man, it's not my area of expertise, and it's not something I would pretend to know a whole lot about. So, but yeah, I mean, I know like the whole blue light and stuff like that is not great for us. So.
Yeah, so let's touch on that a little bit, because I'm going to take my selfish portion of the show right now and say I live, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's kind of towards the northern latitude where we won't get as much sun. It's cloudy half the time. I have Polish genes, so I don't react well with the sun. Is there any supplemental lighting or lighting changes I can make to where, hey, maybe this lighting is going to be better or less reductive than another form of lighting?
That's a great question. So indoor lighting, it's super important to consider the quality of your indoor lighting, because people spend 90% of their time or something like that. I had a light expert on my podcast talk about this. He said people spend 90% of their time under indoor lighting, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because once you understand how important light is, right? It's just like food. Essentially, most people spend 90% of the time eating junk light. Their cells do, right? Wavelengths of light that are not healthy for them. In general, there are a couple culprits. One are LED light bulbs. The other ones are CFLs, right?
Okay.
And this is kind of controversial because these are quote unquote more energy efficient, right? So a lot of people will get LED light bulbs or CFLs for their house because they'll save on energy costs. but it actually fucks up their health, their circadian rhythm, their internal clock is all messed up, their skin can get messed up and cause mood, issues. So it's not good. The best sources of light for your house are incandescent light bulbs, like the old school Edison kind.
Okay.
Crystal rock salt lamps, like those hippie glowing orange rock salt lamps, or candles, especially for nighttime use. These are what I have in my house, man. I have crystal rock salt lamps and the old school Edison bulbs everywhere. So yeah, that's the best form of lighting. And some, people would be like, well, those incandescent bulbs are not energy efficient at all. They aren't as efficient with regards to creating light as CFLs or LEDs are. But they actually, one thing that I think people don't understand is they actually emit heat too. So when you live in a northern environment like we do, Ben, they can contribute to kind of warming up a room a little bit, which can allow you to turn on your furnace a little bit, which in turn kind of like equalizes the net impact, using that bulb that's technically less energy efficient, would have.
Yeah.
So can I hop in?
Absolutely.
I need to apologize real quick because I had to step out, but we just got hit with a tornado warning, so all hell was breaking loose upstairs. So that's why I jumped up. So first, I want to preface this with, I don't want it to sound like I'm attacking any ideas or disagreeing or anything like that. But for the sake of podcasting and the audience, I'm just going to ask questions. Like, I just want to know like the truth of everything, or right? Like, just expound on things. So when we talk about things like light pollution or like light bothering us, and I'm not saying I disagree with anything that you said, or like talking about water quality, which obviously I feel is pretty important. I mean, water is very important. It's the obviously, but going through like following other people or seeing things on social media and stuff like that, I know there's going to be people that would say, well, doesn't our body do a pretty good job of, and you haven't used this word like a detox or something like that, but we have kidneys, our liver and stuff like that. So by taking these approaches and stuff like that, paying attention to the quality of our water or what kind of light we're in, stuff like that, is it because we're so inundated with bad things right now or low quality things that we have to pay more attention to it? Or does our body not do a good enough job filtering out the low quality things that we find in our water or problems that might be associated with different sort of light exposure? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, people will kind of say like, oh, you don't need to detox because that's what your liver and kidneys are for, right? People will say that a lot. Here's the deal with that kind of thinking. Think of your body as being under an overall physiologic stress load. Okay? There's a load on your body all the time, just like there would be on a barbell when you're doing squats or something like that. Your liver and your kidneys, yes, they are detoxifying organs. They do that for you. But they can get overburdened and become shut down when there's too much responsibility given to them, okay? So when you think about things like environmental pollution and how there's really nothing you could do about that. If you live in a city, you're just breathing that in. That's one job for your liver and your kidneys to like work on, any kind of like chemicals you come into exposure to, and you touch, they're going to go into your bloodstream. Your liver and kidneys are going to have to work on that. Basically, what I'm saying here is there is a variety of stressors in the environment that you can't even do anything about. Just by living on the planet in the 21st century, your body is under a pretty substantial load from these things. And yeah, we have processes built into our physiology that are supposed to take care of these things and kind of like protect us from them. But we reach a point, like a critical mass, where if we get stressed out beyond just like a certain tipping point, then we start to experience, failure. And this manifests as disease, in this case, maybe particularly organ failure. There's is what I'm saying making sense here? Essentially,
no, that's kind of what I thought too, because I mean, for honesty's sake, like I'm the first one to when I see someone, pushing detox or something like that, I'm like, come on, like really, like this is what we're, drink this green thing or whatever. But most of the time when I see that, it's associated with, hey, drink this drink and you're going to lose, 15 pounds in 2 weeks. And that shit it makes my blood boil. And things like that. But what you're saying is really making sense because, okay, like let's look back to, the 1870s, 1880s. Like we didn't have factories producing, pollutants in the air or things going into the water. You're in Michigan, everything that was going on in Michigan and things like that. So that does make sense. To where, we would reach this certain level. And I guess I never thought about it as being under constant load. Like now you're speaking meathead language that I can kind of understand,
Yes.
I'm a basic knuckle dragger at heart. So no, that does make sense. I see where you're going at with that. But I mean, is organ failure like really something that we'd have to worry about? Or is this something that will kind of manifest itself in other ways? Like maybe, I mean, I don't know.
Organ failure is a bad example, but I mean, think about things like
it's just because I'm sitting here drinking beer while talking. So I mean,
think about things like chronic fatigue. Think about any kind of chronic illness, cancer. Mm-hmm. How many people do you know that have cancer? I lost my father from cancer. My girlfriend got cancer when she was 16. Cancer is on the rise, man. And really, science doesn't really have any way to quantify or point to reasons as to why this is happening. And again, it comes back down to the fact that we're multifactorial beings, and there's a lot of things that, again, go into the input of our health. And a lot of people are just not aware of all of them, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, coming back to this analogy of a physiologic load, you can only take so much stress from viruses that are in your body, from bacterial infections that you may have, fungal infections that you may have, any kind of environmental toxins or pollutants, thoughts that you have that, cause your epigenetics to be regulated in dysfunctional ways. It's just like, you can take, if your liver was like a man holding like a strongman yoke or something like that, like, yeah, you can start stacking weights on that thing and, a really strong dude can stay there and like hold that. But at a certain point, it's just going to, you can't just keep stacking shit on top of that guy indefinitely without him crumbling underneath you. And all of your body's like autonomic systems kind of are like that too. You can only stress them to a certain point. Your immune system, they all kind of function this way. Your cardiovascular system, they are designed perfectly to work perfectly in function with us. But, you can only put so much weight and responsibility on their plate before, things start to break down. And this is like, this idea kind of, I was first exposed to it by studying Paul Chek and all of the work that he's done. So that's where I kind of understood this idea of physiologic stress load. And yeah, there are a lot of things inside that people are dealing with. Viral infections are like one of them. Like Epstein-Barr virus that causes mono. Like once you have that pretty much all viruses stay with us for life, but our immune system keeps them suppressed. And but these things are just there. They're like low-grade taxes on our physiology. So it's the way I look at it is there's so much stuff like basically attacking our body in our environment nowadays, the food supply, the lighting, all this stuff that we talked about. We can really help our body deal with a lot of that by mitigating our exposure to unnecessary things that we just don't need to be exposing ourselves to. Like, I'm a big proponent of eating organic if you can, and then going beyond organic, which has its own issues. Try to buy stuff from your local farmer's market, right? Just completely bypass big organic farms, which have their own problems. Get them from a local farmer that Basically, just give your body a easier time to detoxify. So I'm like you, Adam. I don't really like detox drinks and things like that. I think one of the most effective detoxes is fasting.
Yes.
Yeah, just like stop putting toxic shit in your body too, right?
Yeah, like
people
just not for a little bit. Like, you'll be okay. Let's try that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
agree.
that's like toxicology 101, by the way, is stop putting toxins in.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of like, people always look like to like, what can I put into my body to help with this detox? Well, that's like, you're looking way down the continuum. The first step is to stop putting whatever it is that's toxic into you. You know, stop eating shitty. Stop. Yeah. You know, so that's the
Designed
most effective
really well. Yeah, like it's kind of fascinating how the human body works and can perform. And like, if you just stop doing stuff for a little bit, you'd be shocked at how much better you might feel. And hey, here's another idea: get a full 8 hours of sleep, maybe even a little bit more. Take a nap, see how you feel. So, yeah, I completely agree. So, one more thing, and I don't want to step on Ben's toes here or anything or take over, but I'm just curious because when I was going through your Instagram and stuff like that, you mentioned one of my favorite words, and I'm being real right now, keto. And Ben's going to roll his eyes because he hates when I get on a keto roll. But are you a fan of the ketogenic diet? Is it something that you're following? Do you prescribe it for others? What's your? And I mean, we can go on for hours and hours about this, but
and
in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, I think keto has certain applications for sure, for certain populations too. You know, like type 2 diabetes, people with cancer. I actually had a like oncologist. She's actually a naturopath, but specializes in naturopathic oncology. But she teaches people how to use keto with cancer. And the way that works is basically cancers are cancer cells are obligate consumers of glucose, blood sugar. So if you can restrict that, you can restrict what they're like literally fueling themselves to proliferate by. Essentially, epilepsy is another way that it's been used therapeutically in the past. So I think that the keto diet has specific applications that are good for certain disease states. I also think it's a good way to help people get like shredded. A lot of people criticize it and say it's not sustainable. I don't know what your view is on it, but the way I really feel about it is I think you should eat from an ancestral perspective, considering where your family lineage comes from, because your ancestors, if you believe in evolution, evolved and adapted to the food sources that they had access to given their local terrain. And if you're white guys like us, our ancestors evolved far away from the equator where they didn't have an abundance of carbohydrates to eat, especially not in the winter time when, I mean, even here in Michigan, at this latitude line, there's no carbohydrates available in the winter months. They only become available in the summer months. So I kind of like to eat seasonally, where I'll eat more keto in the winter, at least lower carb, higher fat, and I'll allow myself more carbs in the summer. And this is typically what I advise my clients to look into or consider for themselves as well. But it really depends on, what their goals are and myriad other factors. I try to be as bio-individualized as possible. But I mean, bodybuilders have known about keto for like a long ass time. There are a few things you can do.
I'm sorry.
I was pretty much done.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, I think I started out as a hardcore keto zealot, and I hated people that took in carbs, and I thought they were idiots. I've kind of evolved my thinking. I think you can lose because primarily here we're talking about losing weight, right? It
has been shown to like negatively affect power-based sports.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like being in the strength and conditioning field, and former powerlifter and things like that. I mean, my athletes, they're just going to work better with carbs. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. With wrestlers, yeah. So I mean, but for the majority of us, and if I'm talking to soccer mom off the street and she tells me, she wants to lose 100 pounds, carbs are going to be the first thing that we're going to cut back. And I'm kind of at the standpoint now where it's like, earn your carbs, man. Like, let's get a hard workout in. Let's do something to earn it. Like, not just because you had a really good day at work doesn't mean you need to celebrate with ice cream. That's not earning your carbs, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's shown how I've grown over time, and maybe how Ben has rubbed off on me, is where before I thought keto was the only way that you could go. And I do think that there's a lot of health benefits to it. And we've had, our buddy Chris Irvin on here who works with different keto companies and, working on his PhD for it. I've read Tripping Over the Truth and got, looking at my bookshelf. Now I got all these books up there about it. I think there's a lot of benefits, especially with the type 2 diabetes thing. It's like, there's no reason for really anybody to have that. There's no reason for people to be suffering. Like, you ate yourself into a disease there, for the most part. So I think there are like a lot of good things for it. I always resort back to it because I think it's the easiest way to eat. Like, I like meat and I like, so I mean, for me to just live on steak and stuff like that, I can do that. So yeah, and I like the cognitive benefits that come with it. So, but I think, again, Ben and I always talk about, we don't really like the word healthy. We like optimal, like what's going to be optimal for you, your lifestyle, where are you at, what's your schedule, things like that. And
I think you got to be individualized with it too, man. Because some people really do not respond well to keto at all.
Sure. Yeah.
Other people really do. So it's like, you got to find what works for you, right? Yeah. Everybody is like trying to force what worked for them down everybody else's throat. And it's like, it doesn't work like that.
And I think that's kind of where I was at, a few years back. I'm like, oh, it worked for me. It must work for everybody. And that's definitely not the case. So I'd like to think that I've grown a little bit in the past few years, but I do enjoy talking about it, reading about it. And I think it's beneficial for most people. So, but Ben, what else you got, buddy? I don't want to keep stepping over.
Yeah, we're on an hour, which is a little bit longer than we expected, but we've been having a good conversation. So, Blake, I know you are coming out with a new business venture here coming up soon, really in line with that healthy, clean nutrition angle. Can you talk to everyone about that? Maybe talk about your nutritional line, talk about your podcast, talk about whatever you want to talk about for, maybe the next 5-10 minutes, and we can wrap it up here.
Sure, man. Yeah. I started a new company called Potentia Wellness, and we are basically a curator and provider of high-grade medicinal herbs. And we launched an herbal blend, or we're launching it. We're in the process of it, which helps people, it basically helps support people's body when they're under a lot of stress and anxiety. And that's what we designed it for. So it doesn't have any stimulants in it. It has a bunch of adaptogenic herbs, which again helps support the body under stress and anxiety. We put a lot of things in there that basically just make you really calm. And it's a super clean formula. It's 0 net carbs. Adam would like that. It's sweetened with stevia and monk fruit. It's just basically cocoa, a bunch of herbs and medicinal mushrooms, reishi and cordyceps, and stevia and monk fruit. So it's like a chocolatey drink. You can add it to your coffee. You can drink it by itself, and it calms you down. So that's exactly why we designed it, is to help calm people down, help get them into that parasympathetic nervous system so they can actually relax, which I found to be a very big problem with a lot of people nowadays. A lot of people can't turn off, they're constantly stimulated. They're stressed out all the time, and they need something that's going to help bring about some, calmness and inner peace. And that's why we basically started this company and made this drink. I've been eating this or drinking this drink myself for like the past 5 years. So I'm basically just bringing it to market here. But yeah, you can check us out over at Potentia Wellness, or you can check me out over at GuerillaZen, YouTube and Instagram. Those are my biggest places.
So I have one more question that I have to ask before we go, and I'm sorry, to drag this out. If you have to go, I completely understand. The Zen part of GuerillaZen Fitness. Can you just real quick talk to me about that? What's your beliefs there? And I assume it's like meditation, and again getting into that parasympathetic system, stuff like that, calming down a little bit is what I'm guessing. But what's that all about?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's pretty complicated, but it basically, the reason why I named my business that is because I believe that everything in the universe is dual. Everything is polar. Everything has an opposite. And I think that should be reflected in your training and health routines as well, which is why I created that. So gorilla, I spelled it in my business like guerrilla fighter, which is a very masculine, yang, aggressive thing. And then I paired it with Zen, which is many people would, equate that to being something totally different, opposite of what a guerrilla fighter is and stands for and does. And that's really what I was trying to do, is capture that polarity in my title. So for example, dudes like yourself, Adam, a lot of guys like you are guys that are clients of mine, and they're power lifters, strongmen. They come to me because they wreck their body. They have so many different joint issues and muscular imbalances, and they're super tight all the time. They just have muscle. It's like their whole body is just like contracted all the time. And somebody like that really needs to like not only do corrective exercise, but maybe look into doing like yoga, something on the other side of the spectrum, completely opposite of what you've been doing and what your really dominant behaviors and training styles are like. And that's really what I try to advocate through GuerillaZen.
Gotcha. Okay. No, in the powerlifting, it was years ago. I've calmed down a lot now, so you can have, not really walking that walk anymore. Still train as hard as I can, but try to be smart and take care of myself. I want to be around for a while. So no, but good stuff. I appreciate it. Ben, anything else?
I think I'm good. Blake, you got anything that we haven't got to? Well, there's probably a lot that you have knowledge of that we haven't got to, but anything, on your mind that you want to wrap up the show with?
No, that's it. Thank you guys for having me on. This is a fun conversation.
Yeah, had a good time. All right, with that, I think we are good to go if everyone's made their piece. I don't know, Adam, usually you wrap up this thing.
Yeah,
I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm completely lost.
No, it's fine. You actually have a use for me now. No, Blake, I appreciate it. And I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the different perspectives and things like that. And definitely gives me more to think about. So that's always good. And that's kind of the name of the game, is to not be so locked into one belief or be so dogmatic about something that you don't explore different avenues. And I think that's what we did today. So I greatly appreciate it. And we will link to all of your stuff in the show notes and on the website, Facebook, everything like that. So you guys can go check Blake out, check out his new supplement line. With that, we will wrap this up, and Ben and I will be right back to close everything up. So thanks a lot, Blake.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you.